The new MacBooks come in a variant of options, but if you don't want to pay anything extra, what can you expect from the base model M2 Pro? I've been using my M2 Pro for the last month, and here's my full review. First, the unboxing, and in typical Apple fashion, you get a charger, a laptop, and a power brick. Expect nothing more. Okay, so mine spec'd out with 16 gigs of RAM, 512 gigs of storage, aka the base model, and I think the base model M2 Pro is the perfect machine for most anyone. The M2 Pro performs so well that I would say the 1K upgrade to the M2 Max is pretty much useless. In typical Apple style, unless you're okay with deleting some local files, you should be ready to pay the extra $200 for just 500 gigs of more storage, making your machine the 1TB version. You can scrape by with 512 gigs of storage, but when you consider the things that this machine is capable of, that 1TB upgrade may actually be worthwhile. Not only will you double your storage capacity, but you should also see faster SSD speed, as Apple decided to put the 512GB NAND on one chip, significantly lowering the SSD speeds in some cases. The base model MacBook is not cheap in any regard. $2,500 for a laptop is a steep price, but when you consider other offerings from the Windows side, it's not much better. To get a screen and a battery, you still need to consider the performance. This Mac draws almost no power. At full load, it can last multiple hours on battery and never slows down. The M2 Pro comes in two size options, 14 and 16 inches. And while the 14 is a great machine, I think the larger battery and extra screen size is a must. Apple makes claims of over 22 hours of battery life on video playback, and I do believe these claims. However, as over my testing, charging the MacBook Pro is not something that I ever had to think about. I did a battery drain test while testing some games and benchmarking. While we did drain the battery, the included charger made a breeze of charging the MacBook, with us also doing a charging test. In just 1.5 hours, we were able to go from 9% to 97%, incredibly impressive, considering we never stopped our testing during the charge. Not only is this machine power efficient, it's extremely silent. When gaming, we could still hear the fan spinning up, but I don't think the machine was actually hot. Apple's design language is top tier, and they made this machine no exception, while adding more ports. Another amazing point of this machine, the I/O is absolutely leading edge, with 3 Thunderbolt ports, an SD card reader, and an HDMI 2.1 port with a headphone jack. The keyboard and trackpad are also top tiered, as to be expected. The design hasn't changed much in that regard, with Touch ID still being in the same top right spot. Webcam in the notch being a nice 1080p upgrade, you should expect some fairly decent shot. Now, when you first unbox and set up your MacBook, depending on when you buy it, you might have an update for macOS Sonoma. While Sonoma is still currently in beta, I decided to install it and give it a try for this video and likely moving forward. macOS Ventura, while feeling nice, the new features of macOS Sonoma are nice enough to say that if you're on Ventura now, giving the beta a try may be worthwhile. So a fresh boot of Sonoma, where should you start out in order to get your MacBook on its way to being a brand new powerhouse beast? FileVault. Whether you turn on FileVault or not, your MacBook SSD is encrypted with a custom Apple chip that will make it basically unreadable to anyone but your Mac. But FileVault just adds an extra layer of security while still keeping you in control of the encryption on your Mac. So on a fresh boot, give this setting a look over first. Next, while in your settings, your trackpad. Everyone has a different style, but most people do not use the natural tracking, wherever the hell Apple got that from, only Tim knows. In your trackpad settings, there's a number of things you can change, like gestures, so maybe looking around here as well is a good choice. If you want, you can move over to your dock as well. However, I tend to just resize and forget. There's a number of things you can do there too. Something new in macOS Sonoma, widgets, which are really cool, and not only can you get some from Apple, but you can also get some from apps, and you can install them via the App Store. Custom widgets are something cool, and I decided to give this app called Color Widgets a try. It has a free version and a paid version, but the free one is good enough and lets you add some really cool stuff. Apple has added a bunch of new live wallpapers to complement their new login page redesign, which is fairly nice. They have lots of really nice wallpapers, but an app that lets you get more is iWallpaper. But it has a really nasty watermark, so you may end up wanting to pay the extra $5 for the full version. Sadly, Apple still has not added a native RAR archive, and a fairly decent app that lets you is Keka, costing $3.99. Now, if you want Windows style snapping, you'll have to dish out another $2.99 for an app called Windows Snapping. But finally, you have what I would say is an optimal MacBook setup. So now what? Download Adobe if you use it, or Final Cut if that's your tea, Chrome for the culture, and you want a game without having to learn the terminal, download Crossover. But sadly, eventually you'll have to buy a license, and it's fairly worth the money, but $75 for a year is pretty steep. Setting up your Mac can be completely customized, and you should set it up how you feel most comfortable. It does suck to see just how many apps you need to make Mac a true bliss experience, but remember, with Windows you have to install programs as well. But you may not care too much about the OS or customization, and simply want to know how will this Mac perform. The new M2 Pro comes with a 12-core CPU and a 19-core GPU. Performance on the two is outstanding. There aren't many apps that can slow your machine down, and there's only a few tests that really put this machine to its paces. I tested a few games and even modded Minecraft. This machine does very well. I really think MacBooks are to the point where getting one over the other is the only real question. Last generation M1 Max and Ultra were outstanding and now being on sale used in most cases for half the original price. Instead of spending 1K on a new Windows machine, maybe you should just look at last generation. I don't have a last gen Mac, but judging by what we're seeing here, I can say that these laptops are amazing. Fast, power efficient, sleek, and well built, but still compared to similar Windows machine, price wise, yes, you're not getting the same raw power, but I think in time we'll start to see MacBooks catching up with Windows offerings.